I want to return now to Labor's green dream, its so-called renewable energy transition. There's plenty of BS and excitement from some sections of the media lately about falling wholesale electricity prices. According to the energy market operator, an abundance of solar and wind power sent wholesale electricity prices plunging in the last 3 months of 2025. The key word, of course, is wholesale, not the price you're slugged on your bill. Now, New Scientist magazine has joined this bandwagon. This state's power prices are plummeting as it nears 100% renewables. South Australia is proving to the world that relying largely on wind and solar energy with battery backup is incredibly cheap, with electricity prices tumbling by 30% in a year and sometimes going negative. Now, if you believe that spin, you'll believe anything, because those are wholesale prices that have fallen, not the retail prices that we all pay. And South Australia still has the nation's highest power prices. Angus Taylor has hit the ground running on this issue, taking up the fight to Labor on energy today. Have a look.
Everything is costing more because Australians in homes, in businesses, factories, energy has become more expensive. Higher energy prices spread right across the economy. Driven by their net zero ideology, Labor has turned its back on cheap and reliable energy. Albanese and Bowen would gladly spend trillions of taxpayers' dollars over decades to try to reach net zero. Labor is driven by a moral duty to reduce emissions that will reduce our living standards. In contrast, my moral duty is to restore our standard of living by restoring cheap and reliable energy.
Let's bring in Aidan Morrison, who's the Energy Program Director at the Centre for Independent Studies. Thanks for joining us again, Aidan. Tell us about these plummeting wholesale electricity prices in South Australia and why retail prices still don't go down and South Australians still have the highest prices in the country.
Yeah, that's right. Well, wholesale prices are actually they're a wholesale market and they're wildly volatile, right? And they're wildly volatile at every time scale. 5 minutes to 5 minutes, they can swing by thousands and thousands of dollars. Quarter to quarter, they can also swing around a whole enormous amount as well. And so what happened last quarter, it was a good quarter for coal, first of all. A lot of the maintenance paid off. Very good quarter for wind. And we got a pretty low quarter in terms of the volatility in the wholesale market. But unfortunately, retail prices include the networks, and we need to build all these transmission lines. That's not coming down. In fact, it's about to ramp up. South Australia is still the very leader of that state of kind of needing to have high network costs.
See, this is the point, isn't it? We all know, of course, Blind Freddie can see when you've got a windmill or a solar farm, when it's generating power, it's generating it at a low cost, a low wholesale cost. But you have to transmit it, but crucially, you have to be able to store it, batteries and the like, which is very expensive. And thirdly, of course, you've got to have a backup, whether it's gas or coal or something else to back it up. So the cost that ends up with the consumer doesn't bear any real direct relevance, does it, to the wholesale price? That's
right. It's almost as though it's just a totally different product, all right? So if you want to consume feast and famine energy and only be able to do things when the weather is right for you, that's a different product. If you want to be able to consume on-demand energy, which is there when you want to do something, then you have to pay for all these other parts of the system, including backup gas generation, including backup coal, all the transmission and storage, and that turns out to be still very expensive.
Well, South Australia is my old home state. I lived there until 15 or 16 years ago. I still barrack for the local footy team, absolutely. But they're very proud of being nearly 100% renewable. They have two big interconnectors, I think maybe three big interconnectors now into Victoria and New South Wales. Could they survive without those?
Look, I think they would have a very hard time surviving the long term without those. They're trying to improve that situation as much as they can, but at the moment, prices would certainly be massively higher if they wanted to have the same level of reliability whilst cutting those interconnectors.
And in the end, when the wind's not blowing, don't they bring in coal-fired power station from Victoria?
Yes, they do bring in coal-fired power stations in Victoria, sometimes even when the wind is blowing as well too.
It's bizarre. Let me just show you something that the Energy Minister, Chris Bowen, said about wholesale prices the other week.
We saw wholesale energy prices tumble by huge amounts. Now, there's a lot more work to do to make sure that those wholesale prices flow through to consumers this year and beyond. And that's why things like solar sharer and our cheaper home batteries and our other reforms to energy pricing are so important to ensure that consumers get a fair deal out of this progress.
Now, at least he's honest enough to say that those wholesale prices aren't coming through and they need to do a lot more to get prices down. But what he calls reforms, like these battery programs, this is spending hundreds of millions, billions of dollars more of taxpayers' money and private expenditure to try and make sure we can get through this.
That's absolutely right. So the cheaper home battery scheme that you mentioned there, they first estimated that would be $2.3 billion. After less than 6 months, it turns out, if you look at their revision, that it was blown out to projected to be about $14 billion, all right? So they revised that back down by putting a few clamps on later to about $7 billion. But the batteries are 3 or 4 times that. So they are rushing tens of billions of dollars of expenditure rapidly into the economy at a time when they're trying to fight inflation. So this is all pulling the wrong levers the wrong direction if they're trying to actually help the economy.
It's all smoke and mirrors, right? Because you have to have a fair bit of money to get the home battery anyway. Struggling working families can't afford to do it. The government chips in a bit, that helps out. So it costs taxpayers, costs the homeowners. It'll take them years to see a return on that. And this is all to try and convince us that the transition is working.
Yeah, so what they've done is really the worst thing, because they've locked in essentially a big subsidy to those who are most able, those people that can still dish out $10,000 or $20,000 or $30,000 for a big solar and battery system and get an extra 15, 20 grand top up from the government. The people who can afford that have been given assistance, but it kicks the can down the road because it actually shifts a lot more network costs onto the remaining people that are still consuming power throughout the day. So they end up paying a higher share of the network costs.
Yeah.
Very inequitable. It's lumping those least able to afford it with the highest share of the costs.
Spot on, Aidan. Thanks for cutting through all this mess. I appreciate it.